Some of you might be aware that in addition to Sunday mornings, there is more. I don't just work Sunday mornings. And part of that sort of process of the week is that usually on Wednesday there is a video reflection. Just as I'm saying that out loud, I'm thinking to myself, how ironic you're saying that, given that you usually take the summers off, and that would start with the beginning of July next week. Anyway, the point is, there's a video reflection on Wednesdays, and then Thursdays I post a blog, and those things are usually sort of my earliest thinking and where I'm going to go with what I want to talk about on the Sunday, usually. So this week, I post a video reflection on Wednesday, and on Thursday, somebody asked me about it because they found a particular aspect of it to be, let's say, challenging. Because I mentioned Star Trek. And I do that, as you are probably aware. If you've ever heard me speak more than once, the odds are pretty good. You've heard me use some sort of pop culture reference that hardly anyone in the room would get. And then I have to explain it. Explanation usually is helpful, I hope. If it's not, don't say no. But the point is, I used a pop culture reference that they didn't get particularly because for some reason, which is completely unknown to me, they don't watch Star Trek. Specifically, Star Trek The Next Generation, the episode was Darmok. Look it up. In any case, as the conversation progressed, we started talking about pop culture references and how people often don't understand things that are mentioned. And I, of course, defending myself, mentioned the fact that quite often preachers tend to quote theologians that no one's ever heard of. And quite often we do that just to impress upon you that we've read famous theologians that you've never heard of. But in the midst of that conversation, Alan Richards said that who's a retired minister, said that when he was at seminary, he was told a really important piece of advice. And it was awesome, and I couldn't remember all of it, so I had to text Alan and ask him, because I wanted to tell you it this morning. And this is what Alan texted me back. This is the first part of this is the quote. "Read the books your people read, and watch the movies they watch. You'll learn a lot about them." And then Alan says, "My words, remembering as best I can what I learned from Dr. Tannerhill at St. Andrews. That was in the early 70s when there was no social media as we know it." A couple of thoughts about that. First of all, that's awesome advice. And everyone should take it, not just clergy. Everyone should take it. Because how else will you know people if you don't know what they read and what they watch? And this is one of the good things and bad things about social media, of course, is that depending on what social media you experience, you may or may not want to know that person. So it's important to... That was the wrong way to express that. Because this is the thing about that quote, is we can't understand each other if we don't know each other well enough. And quite often, we spend a lot of time listening to respond and not enough time listening to understand. We don't know what each of us is experiencing in life. We don't know what kind of books people like. We don't know what kind of shows they watch or movies they watch, if indeed they watch any. We don't know what is going on with them. How are we supposed to understand? How are we supposed to build a relationship with someone that we don't know and don't understand? And this is part of our problem, I think, these days, is that we don't tend to establish relationships based on understanding each other. We tend to establish relationships on the basis of, you will understand me, and then we'll be good. And I'm not saying it's not important for others to understand who we are. It's also important for us to understand who they are and have a dialogue based on trying to understand each other, not trying to force our ideas on others. How else will we get to know them? And the thing is, whatever it is, whether you get to know, I don't agree with that, or that's not for me, or you learn something amazing that you'd like to incorporate in your own life, you're learning something. And how else will we learn? If you people don't start watching Star Trek. Specifically The Next Generation. That's usually where most of my pop culture references come from, although I do use the original series sometimes too. The point is, we tend to respond to what we hear from people by imposing our response. That's our response, rather than learn first. And it's particularly important when we don't understand language, because you may say things that are exactly the same thing that I'm saying, but you're not using the same language. And that isn't just a question of how it translates into different languages. It's how it translates into the words you are using. Personally, I think that the main thing that creates different denominations of the Christian church is traditions, different traditions, which is great. I think that's awesome. Where it goes wrong is when those traditions go, mine is right and yours is wrong. How is that possible? There is one God. We all come to that one God our own way. No, we don't. You will come my way. That's how it happens. But what if you know God a way that's different than the way I know God? What if, say, you know God as the Spirit that lives in all things, as the Spirit of creation, the Spirit of life that's not just in people, but in all living things? What if we all understood things that way, and then that might, say, impact how we treat creation, not just each other, but all of creation? Wouldn't it be great if we could learn from something like that, rather than simply say, nope, that's wrong. This is God. How I define God is God. But what if how you define God is good for you, but not necessarily for someone else? Because we are all unique and individual, but there is that one thing that connects us all, and that's the oneness of God, however you understand that. Whether it is the God as we hear in the Bible, whether it's the God that you see as the Spirit of life in creation, whether it's the God that is that it could even be the Force. Where do you think he got that idea from? Sorry, that was a Star Wars reference, not a Star Trek reference. Let's be clear, I do know the difference. You should too. But that's the thing, is we start talking as if, in fact, we start talking as if our way is the way. And that's the thing about the way, as Jesus talks about it. The way is true and life-giving. The way is how we live in relationship with each other. The way is about kindness and compassion and grace. How will you have that if you don't have empathy first? And you can't have empathy if you don't understand. If I don't know your story, how am I supposed to have empathy? Now, if it sounds like I'm about to embark on the same thing I've been saying for weeks, I am actually, just for a minute. But this is one of the things about the stories we read about Jesus in the Bible, is all of those stories completely leave out what I think is probably the most important part, which is, I bet Jesus sat down with them and the first thing he said was, tell me your story. I don't think Jesus just kind of went, oh, that person looks like they can't walk properly. Boom, you're done, you're good, you're healed. I think Jesus said to them, tell me your story. What's your life been like? What is your life like? How are you feeling? Because not only would Jesus then begin to understand them and know what to offer them, I think that's how Jesus makes a connection with people. His connection is that he has empathy for them. He understands their story. He hears where they're coming from. He identifies with things in their story. And then the most important thing that he offers them is your story has been heard. Quite often, one of the biggest problems that people have is that they don't feel like they are seen or heard. And that the beginning of healing begins with, I hear you and I'm trying to understand what you are telling me. Help me learn more about you. Help me learn not just what is going on in this moment, but what brought you here. Briefly, very briefly, Fern, very briefly, the Star Trek episode that I was referring to, Darmok, is about how two peoples meet each other and don't know how to communicate because they can understand the words, but they don't understand what each is saying. Like, Damien obviously did see Darmok. Okay. But what happens is the leader of one basically, essentially kidnaps, but creates an opportunity for the two leaders to experience working together in order to defeat a common foe. And through doing that, the captain of the Enterprise understands that these people speak entirely on the basis of using mythical and legendary and historical stories as metaphors for something that's happening in the moment. So if a Trekkie comes up to you and says Darmok and Jalad at Tanagra, what they mean is they'd like to work together with you in order to accomplish a particular purpose or defeat a common foe.
Temba, his arms wide.
Which means, okay, I'm good to do that. And that, thank you, Damien. That's actually a really excellent example because so what Damien said was Temba, his arms wide.
Which means I come in peace from the story.
Open arms, not a clenched fist. Which would you rather pay attention to? Yeah. But in order to do that, you have to make yourself vulnerable enough to want to hear the story. You have to make yourself vulnerable enough to say, before I impose mine on you, tell me your story. Let me hear what's going on with you. And that works, I think, not just with individuals, it works with cultures and nations too. And we don't do it. We don't. We'd rather impose who we are on others because that's easier. I don't have to worry about understanding you now. But think about how different the world would be if we did go the other way. If we did say, tell me your story, help me learn, help me make a connection with you. Help me have empathy for you and help you have empathy for me by sharing our stories and learning about each other. So that then, when we have common stories that we might tell slightly differently, say with either different language or different images, we might learn some amazing things. Personally, in my life, and I've been in the church for a very long time now, I have never really understood the point of the kingdom of heaven is near until I read the First Nations edition, where they describe heaven as the good road. Because it reminds you, first of all, it's not a place, it's not a destination, it's a journey. And the journey is always movement. Look around you. So is the world. That's one of my favorite things. One of my other favorite things, by the way, about the First Nations version is that they, instead of using the names that we know of characters, they use the description. Creator sets free instead of Jesus. I think that really helps our understanding. I think that really helps our understanding of the story, but I think it also really helps our understanding of people who come to that story from a different place, who come to that story from the place of spirit rather than object. God is, guy with white hair, beard, long white robe, sits on a throne on a cloud, No. I understand that we've hopefully we've reached the point where we've let go of that image. But the point is, if that's your image of God, that's your image of God as having power over things with a gesture or some intention, instead of the Spirit that is alive in all things. Not just human beings, but all things that live. That's the Great Spirit. Imagine how different the world could be if we could find a way to being in touch with what's the deepest thing in our hearts that connects us all, that Great Spirit, by trying to understand each other's language, each other's way of, whether it's the language of words or whether it's the language of images or the language of music or whatever language we are using, to understand each other better and reach for that connection that's in every heart.